you start.
Okay, I'm going to start. If you listened to the first episode, you would know why we decided to come back and film a part 2. We realized that we were really nervous when we made the first episode, and it was chaos with all of our babies. And
it was going to be an audio check, and then we just ended up
recording. And so I think it was really great at explaining the why behind what we're doing and how we got there and our history. But we realized we didn't really get that vulnerable. We didn't really go into the nitty gritty hard stuff. And that's what we're asking our guests to do.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to join them in being vulnerable and really asking each other the hard questions and having the hard conversations that we're probably not having on a day-to-day basis, because you can't really survive like that.
Right, exactly. I feel like the one thing that sticks out to me is when you asked me how is it being on my end, and I just said it's terrible, and that just felt like it's true, it is terrible, but it's such a logical answer, and feel like I didn't hit the part to really show the terribleness of what it's like.
Yeah, right. We didn't go into detail, and part of that was we're trying to be brief, and then part of that was probably a little scared to get into it.
Yeah. I know. And I'm if I cry, I'm just going to edit out. I'm not going to show people crying for 3 minutes straight.
Not 3 minutes, but you're allowed to cry.
Yeah, we can
that's
show a 2-second clip.
A 2-second clip of Erica crying is the maximum.
Is the max.
Okay, so do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I want you to start.
Okay.
That's my avoidance.
I know. So when we originally started talking about doing the podcast, we knew Erica had created this space online for termination for medical reasons for parents who were having to make this choice that doesn't even feel like a choice with very little information. And we said in our intro, oh yeah, we'll get to that later. And then we just never got to it. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get to it now.
Yeah.
And so Erica, I would love you to take us back 3 years to the beginning of your family planning journey and sort of what that looked like for you.
I feel the most important parts are that after Ramsey and I got married, it was 8 months later, we started thinking about planning. And I think it's just my type A personality to go to the OB and say, we want to start having a baby. What should we do? And I remember my OB walking me through all of the things around family planning, and then made a joke of pregnancy isn't a disease. You guys are acting you won't, I don't know, it's a disease.
So I wanted to ask you that because you were very intentional about family planning. It wasn't a willy-nilly sort of decision. You and Ramsey were really excited and very responsible in your decision to expand your family.
And I remember the first time we stopped, we started tracking to get pregnant. We were in Mammoth together. Yep. And I remember I started feeling little tinges and thought oh my gosh, I might be pregnant. And I took a pregnancy test. This is I don't know. It's just so funny. They don't teach you anything. Well, it's not funny. They don't teach you anything about this stuff in school. So I took a pregnancy test. I threw it away. And Jordy later, the next day, asked me,
I was hey, remember you were going to take a pregnancy test? And she's yeah, I did. I took it. But honestly, there was barely a line. And I was Erica, barely a line is still positive.
And I honestly had no idea. I thought it needed to be the ovulation test. You have 2 lines, but one is always darker than the other. So I literally didn't know. And we fished out the pregnancy test and I was pregnant. And I was what? That was really crazy. But then pretty immediately started to spot. And I remember you telling me, because again, I knew nothing. Oh, this can be really common. This is, I can't remember what it's called, implantation.
Implantation bleeding, yeah.
And this would be the time that you would get it, kind of. Although now thinking about it, no. That wasn't, you also didn't.
I didn't know anything either.
Yeah. But then I started cramping a lot and started really heavily bleeding. And then was oh, wait, this isn't going well.
Yeah.
So after my period kind of stabilized, I tried again, got pregnant again. And I remember this time it was like very clear that I was pregnant. It showed on the digital. And I remember being at your house and I was like, oh shit, I kind of started to spot again.
Yep.
And you and Alex were like, you're fine.
I know.
Yeah. You're like,
And it
wasn't. And I think I was 6 weeks pregnant at that point. But I told them like, okay, I'm spotting, so don't get your hopes up.
Yeah.
And then miscarried. And that one was definitely more sad.
Yeah.
Because that felt more real to me. And it's like the secondary losses of like what I go into my mind of like, what would the due date be?
Of course.
Like, it's just so hard not to think about the future right when you see the words like pregnant.
Especially when like you didn't do that the first time because you didn't really know how to accurately read the test.
Correct.
You know, so it's like
I read 5 tests.
Right. Then the second time you're like, oh, okay, like this is pregnant.
Yeah.
And then it's hard not to, I imagine, start being like, what does this mean if this has happened twice?
Yeah. So then I went to my OB and he said, this is really common actually. And the pregnancy test can detect pregnancy hormones way earlier on. And this actually happens way more often than we think. So like just have a lot of sex, which I thought was a really weird solution to the problem, but it felt really nice to normalize that this doesn't need to mean anything.
Right.
Okay. Then
I just want to, can I stop you here for a second? So I'm going to share something with you that I've never shared
Oh my
with you
God. I
before.
feel so nervous.
I know. I feel nervous too.
Okay.
So no, it's not like some big revelation.
Okay.
But I just, since we're here on Grief Street and we're talking about grief, I wanted to normalize the feelings of, I don't know what the right word is, but I remember like holding both so much excitement for you and also feeling really scared because I was like, what's going to happen to our friendship when Erica becomes a mom?
Oh yeah.
I was like, what if we stop being friends? What if our priorities change? What if we're in different stages of life? What if
I remember like feeling that from you without you saying it.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I like tried really hard to like not let that take over.
Well, I think I could probably imagine being on my end of what that would be like if you started the family planning stuff first.
Yeah.
That it would feel like, oh wait, you're moving like further, like not further, but like in a different direction than the direction I'm in. And that would feel like off in some way. Like we're not like totally aligned.
Right. Which is like a very normal thing to like not be totally aligned. But I just wanted to call that out for anyone who's listening to this and thinking like, oh man, there's that like little piece of me that like felt kind of sad or felt envious or whatever. Like that's normal.
Right.
So I'm just calling it out in our story.
And I feel like at that point too, I didn't even have enough time to think, because the moment we thought about trying, we tried, miscarried, tried again, miscarried. So
fast.
I wasn't even thinking so far into the future around that, because it didn't even seem like a real possibility. I thought it was going to take us 6 months to get pregnant. And then I'm like, well, if it takes 6 months, you're probably kind of right around that same timeline.
Right. And it makes sense you wouldn't be thinking about that.
Yeah.
As you're entering your family planning.
Right.
But as the person who's not entering the family planning, sometimes you might have some like conflicting thoughts that like don't feel great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like I did know maybe a little bit of that because I could imagine for myself.
Yeah.
But then I tried again and I was very anxious. I got a pregnancy test and immediately started spotting. And so I was like, fuck this. Like I've been here before. This is now the 3rd time. And I went to UCLA to get my blood test and I saw it doubled. And that was like really different.
Yeah.
Then after that, at my 7 weeks, so I made it to 7 weeks, I was in a therapy session and completely felt this rush of liquid exiting my body. And after the session ended, went in the shower and it was like all blood. And I remember just like crying in the shower of like how I thought I was really pregnant this time. I texted like everyone saying I miscarried.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember you like literally told us you had a miscarriage. You're like, I miscarried. I'm just going to the doctor to confirm.
It was weird because I didn't feel pain, but it was, I mean, everything online says if you bleed, that's bad. And this was the most amount I've ever bled in my life.
Yeah. Scary.
So I go to the doctor the next day, and I told her I had a miscarriage last night, but I don't know, I'm still here just to see the doctor. And then they did the ultrasound scan and there was a heartbeat. And I was like, no, what?
What do you remember feeling in that moment?
Panic, actually.
I'm sure. Like, okay, so if this baby is alive, what's
happening?
Yeah.
And I remember that moment, my doctor told me this is a subchorionic hematoma. It does happen. It's not like so rare, but I remember Chrissy Teigen just had her stillbirth and was like, what are the options? Like, what does this mean? And he's like, you could be perfectly fine. You could have another. It does increase your rates of miscarriage. And then I remember calling you and saying, I don't want to just be pregnant to then have this baby die.
Yeah. I remember that call.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the mentality that you held throughout your pregnancy with Shayla. It was like just waiting for bad news.
Yeah.
And like you had like just a feeling in your heart that like something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I remember we were on a hike and you were halfway at that point and it was during COVID. And I remember you were saying there's a delay with like all these furniture companies. But like I can't order furniture. You're like, I'm scared to order furniture because like that just makes it too real. And like, what if something goes wrong?
Yeah. The night before I had my anatomy scan, Ramsey got mad at me and he was like, why can't you just be happy? Like, I just want to order the stuff. And I started crying on this walk and I was like, I just don't know. I don't know. Let me just wait until tomorrow.
Yeah.
And like, we did name her. I mean, Shayla was chosen before we ever got pregnant. And I came up with the name Brooklyn as a middle name when I was 14 weeks pregnant. And there was a part of me that thought this is going to happen. And then another part that like really didn't believe it. And so at the anatomy scan, they were like, all of these things look good, but are you sure you have your dates right? And it was COVID and I was alone and was confused. And I knew I had my dates right because I'm so type A and it was so planned. Yeah. And they said she was measuring small and there was not enough activity in the placenta cord.
But you left the doctor's office that day not knowing that there was something gravely wrong, but knowing that there was maybe something that was not great happening.
Yeah. And then when my doctor called me and he told me that I needed to go see a maternal fetal medicine doctor, that definitely worried me, but everything that I looked up didn't look too bad. And so then when I went to that first doctor appointment, that's when everything changed because the things that were initial concerns weren't really coming up as much. It was the fact that now her brain hadn't grown in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I remember when they left, because I'm seeing all of this, I'm seeing the measurements and they show you the summary page of where everything lines up. I could see all the brain parts were in like the second percentile and she was small overall, but you could just see that the brain was like off the charts and they kept coming back to her heart and thought there was something wrong with her heart. And in that moment, I kind of knew that something was not right.
And Ramsey was with you at that appointment.
They changed it the day before that he was allowed to come.
I'm so glad.
And I remember he actually asked about termination. So it'll be interesting when we talk to him, like he brought that up and at first the doctors were like, oh, no, like that doesn't need to happen.
Yeah.
But then my OB called me and he's like, this is not normal and referred me to the top maternal fetal medicine doctor. And at that next appointment, which was another week later, her brain still hadn't grown. And you could just see like the drop off in growth.
Yeah.
And told me like what that could mean, which for microcephaly could mean a whole host of things. And there could be some, precision in ultrasound isn't always the best, but it was like quite clear that every part of her brain was off the growth chart and was now like in the negative 0th percentile.
And for anyone who is listening that hasn't like been pregnant or been around people that are pregnant, I think you have to be 30 plus weeks to be able to actually measure any brain activity.
27
weeks. So it wasn't like you had the option at this point in time to wait and see what's going on in the brain. Is there activity? Is it working properly?
Right. Like they saw some things in the brain, like, okay, we're seeing that the corpus callosum is there. So we know that both sides of the brain are like connected, but the cerebellum which is the part of your brain that like has to do with coordination, right. Motor coordination, was also off the chart. So it's like all of these things meant that if she came out into the world like this and did have microcephaly, that she could be like gravely disabled and have seizures. And I joined support groups at that point to learn more about microcephaly and saw kids who had like 800 seizures a month. And a lot of these parents, when their children was born, provided comfort care. So they withheld medical intervention, which to me seemed really similar to ending a pregnancy, but like I was just doing it earlier.
Yeah. So in between these scans, I'm like wondering, how were you surviving?
At this point, I was unwell. Like I remember feeling her kicks inside of me and like knowing that we might like end her life before it starts, and that feeling like so traumatic. And the part of me that was always like, what if none of this is true? What if she'll come out and be okay? Like, and that's still, there still could be some truth to that. Like, we don't know 100% certainty. The lights just turned off.
Wow. Okay, wait, really quick. We just have to say, so Erica feels connected to Shayla through the lights. Like the lights in her first condo, they would like flicker. And the lights just flickered in here, and this isn't still going.
Like
this isn't even
out. I feel like this is a paranormal activity
she's
show.
Here with us.
Yeah, I just remember like wanting her so badly, and I saw ultrasound scans and I saw pictures of her and like loved her so much. And I'm like, how am I having conversations about like having an abortion?
Yeah.
And I didn't even like know the wording that it was an abortion at the time. Like I just was like, I might be ending my pregnancy, and having like really hard conversations with Ramsey about what that would mean for us to know this information and bring her into the world, what that would do for her, for our relationship, for our career. And it felt like so selfish having some of these conversations, but like I knew if she came into the world and we didn't know this information, we would love her, we would make things work. I think it was just the knowing of information, how we could ignore that and like gamble the quality of life
on her life. Yeah. I feel like it's also hard because you got support quickly and like joined all these groups, and you saw real life of like what it looked like for people who had been in similar situations, who had brought their children into the world. And you know, everyone makes their own decision, but like some of those quality of lives were, you know, hard to look at.
Yeah. And so ultimately when I left my maternal fetal medicine doctor, I had asked like, if this was your daughter, what would you tell her? And he said, this is a time when a lot of people would make the choice to end their pregnancy. And then I went to my OB, and he was just like, there is a chance, but I there's a small chance that she could be okay, but there's a large chance that she's not.
Yeah.
And like, this is like the only decision I see. And that gave me a lot of comfort and reassurance that most people don't ever get. And so then I went to the appointment to start the process of termination. And the first step was like putting seaweed sticks inside of you. And they give you an abortion pill basically to like help that process. But I decided to do a surgical procedure called a D&E because I was told that if I went the labor and delivery route, that I would have to be on the maternity ward floor and would have to go in being like, my baby doesn't have a heartbeat, and I would have to like lie around,
like so awful.
Around that, and then hear crying babies around me. And I just thought that would be an extra layer of trauma that I didn't really want. And so like, I'm grateful that I had the choice, and like I really wanted to meet her, but just knew that this would be what's better for my heart.
That's such a hard choice to make, Erica.
Yeah. I remember just like, how do I make the choice? How do I make the choice?
I remember you would go around, you went to where you were born and you pulled up your records to like look at your head circumference. And then you like looked at my head circumference and you measured everyone's head circumference. Like you were gathering as much data as you could, even if it wasn't valid or relevant to your baby. It's like you just wanted more info because you had so little.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like, I hadn't been pregnant before at that time. And so like, I didn't know what it felt like to be pregnant and to like be planning a future family. And I just remember I came over and it was, you'd already made the decision that you were going to do the D&E. But I just remember you said to me, sometimes I just wish that I'd get hit by a car.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have to make the decision.
Yeah.
Like, the lights. And I just remember thinking like that was a moment that it took me from like, my friend is feeling really, really sad about something to like, well, my friend's like contemplating, like she's.
I wasn't suicidal.
You weren't, but that's how heavy this decision was. Like you didn't want to have to make it. And I just remember thinking like, I've never seen my friend like this before.
It was like, I mean, I could bring myself back there like so easily. And I just remember like, I just want to have a miscarriage. Like, I just want to have a miscarriage. Like if someone like were to hit me with a car, then like I'd have a miscarriage and
you wouldn't have to make the choice.
And like, I couldn't believe that after 2 miscarriages, I was praying to have a miscarriage and just like cried myself to sleep every night. Like, please just have a miscarriage, which is so terrible. But I knew at that point what was happening. And I knew that people did have miscarriages from like, because in some ways it wasn't like a viable pregnancy. And so I just like, knowing the information, I knew I couldn't ignore that. Like, I just knew I couldn't ignore that and keep going. Yeah, that was like so terrible.
Yeah, that was just like a moment where the lights are crazy.
I know.
That was just a moment where I realized like, oh wow, like this is not just this is more than just like losing a pregnancy. This is like losing a child and losing a future and losing a piece of your family. And I
mean, I quit my job. I stopped showing up to work.
Yeah.
And I just went on a medical leave. I like just cried like every day because I couldn't show up to work. I didn't really know how to interact with people. I didn't know how to move in the world. I was visibly pregnant. Anywhere I went, conversation would be about my pregnancy. So I felt like I couldn't really show up in the world. And yet there was this narrative that I was like, is this the best thing to do? What's the best thing to do? And no one can tell you with 100% certainty, like what's going to happen. And all I can do is make the decision based on what I have in front of me. and I can't unsee or can't unknow this information.
Yeah.
So then I went through and ended my pregnancy, and I was 24 weeks.
You've talked a lot about this on your like online platform, but just sort of like really not being informed very well by the doctors, like what happens postpartum, and that like a postpartum experience happens whether you have a living baby or not.
Well, I remember in the meeting with a doctor who was going to perform the D&E, and her telling me all of the potential complications that could happen from the procedure, but then also told me, you will be okay physically after. Like if you're emotionally okay, you can get a margarita the next day. Like I was told that, and I guess some parents don't, grieve differently and don't really want to think about this as their first child. There's so many different ways of grieving. And so that sense of normalcy, I was like, I don't think that's going to be me. I actually instead felt any guilt anytime I could do something that I knew I wouldn't be able to do if I was pregnant. So drinking was a huge trigger for me because I knew I wouldn't be able to be drinking if I were pregnant. And so I hemorrhaged and had that emergency procedure, and it was just another layer of grief. But my milk came in, and no one really told me my milk would come in. And the process of drying my milk up was really traumatic. Yeah. And like I had a baby, and so I looked postpartum. I had a huge like hormone crash, like the baby blues, but then another layer of mixed in some trauma there was I just like didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do with myself.
Like, how could you,
Yeah.
Like, I remember when one of Erica's like favorite places to go is Hawaii. And I remember that when you had made the decision that you and Ramsey were just gonna go to Hawaii and like escape for like a week, you were like, I don't have anything to wear. And we just like went to Target and we just bought so much stuff so that you just had options.
I remember like hating doing that. Like, that was so, I hated that.
I hated it because you were buying postpartum clothes when you didn't want to be postpartum. Yeah, just like there's so many layers there.
Yeah.
Of like trauma.
There are. And I just didn't know what communities to find. And now thinking about like in the past 3 years that I've been able to integrate this Shayla's death into my life, it just feels, I don't know, not normal, but I just have adjusted to it as this is the way my life is in a way that I never thought was possible.
Yeah.
And like, I think about her every single day still, and it gives me relief that it's not always through pain.
Yeah.
Because for a long time it was only pain.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Like as you get a little bit farther away from like how raw everything is, that you can like see the beauty.
Yeah.
In those moments too.
And then like really just reminding myself like I did make the most compassionate decision. And something my doctor told me when I was in the waiting room to undergo the D&E is she was like, you like the parents who end their pregnancies are the most compassionate and thoughtful and intentional of parents. And it just brought me a lot of reassurance that like I am a good mom and like I am making the best decision.
Yeah. And I feel like it must have been so challenging, like I feel like it's challenging regardless to go through this loss, but I feel like it's really hard when you don't have a living child.
Yeah. Because
then you're just like always wondering.
Oh, I was like, then like out of desperation.
Yeah.
Like, to like have a living child.
Yeah. Or like, am I a good mom? Will I ever be a mom? Like all of these really big questions about what expanding your family looks like. And fast forward, Erica has 2 beautiful living children.
And I'm like so grateful for that. I mean, like Emma she's like my little like miracle baby. Yeah. And I mean, pregnancy after loss is a whole other thing. But the moment she was placed on my chest, you would think it'd be full relief, but it was like more anxiety of like, oh my gosh, what if something is wrong and it comes uncovered that something's wrong? And like, and then I could have kept Shayla, like it just brought up other layers, but she's my miracle baby.
She's the sweetest.
Yeah, she is. So that's a little bit more about me.
I love you.
Love you too.
Sorry you've been through hard shit.
Yeah.
And you know what? One other thing. I just remember you saying to me, you came over, or I came over to your house after. And I remember you just crying to me and saying like, I don't want this to like ruin pregnancy for you.
Yeah.
Like you were just like already thinking about how this was going to like impact other people. Like, I don't want you to feel sad and I remember actually we had like a moment where obviously what Erica went through, I was very close to it. And so it made me feel like if it can happen to Erica, it can for sure happen to me.
Yeah.
And so it really sped up my family planning timeline.
Right.
And I remember when I was like, how am I going to share this with Erica?
Oh my God. I was like, I need to be pregnant before you.
Yeah. I remember that desperation of like, I can't.
Well, I knew, because I knew if you were pregnant before me, I would have had to like distance our relationship, because I couldn't have like, it would have just been really, because it was traumatic enough being pregnant after loss.
Yeah.
And I was like, my baby's going to die and I'm just going to have to like watch Jordy's baby, like your baby, grow up. And I remember like there was a moment we were pregnant at the same time, and we had like the little ultrasound. Yeah. We did the Doppler. Yeah. And I was like, this is the only moment we're gonna have.
I remember you saying that, and I was like, absolutely not.
But I was
like,
convinced.
So much faith that
I couldn't know it. I just like was like, I'm gonna have to see you have this life that like I had envisioned. Yeah. And I don't know how I can be happy for you because I'm so traumatized. And
that's totally fair.
And like, thank God.
Thank God Erica got pregnant before me.
Yeah, 10 weeks.
She sure did. I remember how you told me. We were at your parents' house on the 4th of July and we were making
Oh my God, I was so anxious.
And you were so anxious. And I remember you just blurted it out. You're like, so I'm pregnant. And I was like, you are? And I remember being so excited for you. Yeah. So excited.
And I was like, please don't be excited. And I was like 4 weeks pregnant.
And I was like, what do you want me to say? Because I didn't say I'm excited for you. I'm just like, okay.
I know.
How would you like me to respond?
I know. I didn't want anyone to be excited for me.
Right. You didn't want like any hopes like put into this pregnancy. And then I found out I was pregnant like 10 weeks later.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know. I found it to be obviously really helpful to be pregnant together. Yeah. But I don't know if it was like that for you. If it felt harder or
I mean,
helpful.
It was harder in the sense of like it just upped the ante of like how much I want this to be true. Yeah. And so then it made me fear, like my fear was higher that it's not going to happen. Yeah. And then like we both had our babies and it was like a magical year. And then
yeah, we had our babies and it was really nice.
And then you started feeling tingling in your left arm.
I did. Started feeling some tingling in my left arm. And I go to the ER and everyone seems fine. I really just went because I didn't have that return to normal that I once had. And I think they were shocked that they actually found something because I didn't have any like stroke-like symptoms, or I was fully functioning. I drove myself there, like.
Right.
And then, I got a CT scan and there was a mass, and they were like, we need to do some further imaging to figure out what kind of mass it is. And so then I got an MRI, and this was all taking like, probably at this point 5 hours. And then after the MRI, they said it's a tumor. We don't know what kind of tumor, but we'll have the surgeon talk to you. So then, it's like a surgeon does surgery.
Right.
So in my mind, I'm like, maybe a biopsy or whatever. I had no idea what to expect. I was just in shock, I think.
When I go back to those text messages, and I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but I remember, I mean, a week ago, I like looked for the text messages and just saw the timing of you finding out information and getting like little glimpses, and you're like a detective of trying to piece everything together. But the moment you knew it was a tumor, you thought, like your mind went to
My mind went to a bad place. Yeah. I didn't know much about brain cancer. So in like my mind, I'm like, okay, you have a tumor, you remove it, and then you do some treatment, and like you're probably fine. But I just didn't think too much about it. I really just tried to stay as in the moment as I could, of like, okay, just get transferred to the next hospital, and then like just get the surgery, and then just wake up from the surgery, and then just recover from the surgery. And then I got a diagnosis a little bit later. And once, I found out about my diagnosis. I mean, I mentioned this in the beginning, but yeah, when I was at the hospital, the radiologist, Erica, was actually sleeping there with me. It wasn't the night of my surgery, it was the next day. And they said most likely GBM on the radiology report. And I think, we wake up in the morning, and I told Erica that, and she's like, what? And I saw her face drop. And I was like, oh, she's done the research too. She knows what that is.
Yeah, I know what that was. And this is the thing when I say like the terribleness and like the thing that makes me so sad. Like, I know I'm going to cry.
Oh no.
Is like, I'm just like, I'm terrified to lose you.
I know. Me too. My best friend.
And like in that moment, I felt like I already like lost you.
I know.
And like, it just, like, I don't know how else to put it, because I didn't want you to worry about me, but I know you already do.
Obviously, I worry about everyone.
I know.
Yeah. But I like, that's why I worry, because I always say, like, I've been asked a lot, like, it seems like you're really focused on like other people's feelings, and like maybe you haven't done your own processing and whatever. And I'm like, no, I just like know that if someone told me that my best friend had terminal brain cancer, I would not be well. I would not be okay. And that's what I just always come back to when I think about you, and when I think about Alex, and when I think about Hank. I'm just like, and obviously Brody, I'm just like, that, like, that's what just makes me so sad, that like this random shitty set of circumstances impacts you guys so much. And like, it sucks for me in the moment, but like, it makes me so sad to think that there will be like a hole there for a long time.
Well, it's like when I think about, sometimes I'm like, you're gonna live forever, and I like really believe that.
I know.
And then other times when I'm like, is this like the first and last Halloween that we have with our kids? Is this like, it's so hard, like, because when I like imagine a life without you, my mind blocks, because that's the part that makes me so sad.
I mean, yeah, that is the part. I've just never imagined a life without you.
Yeah.
Or ever wanted. It's just never something that's even come up before, thankfully.
I remember like right after Shayla died, and I was in Hawaii, and there are these two like 70-year-old women, best friends, and I think I sent you a picture of them, and I'm like, this is gonna be us.
Yeah.
And then I think, will that be us?
I know. And it's like, those are the moments where I'm like, I want to believe that it's possible, but then I'm like, I don't know. It's like, I just never spent time thinking about what my life would look like without you in it.
Yeah.
And thank God I don't have to, but I just feel really sad that that's where your mind is at a lot of the times.
I know.
And like, when we're together, like, that's just like looming in the air, like,
it's like wishful thinking that we can like move our friendship without brain cancer in the background.
Yeah. And like, I do think it's possible. Like,
do you?
Yeah. Like, I think we've done a really good job of maintaining a lot.
Yeah, but
of
it's like
normalcy.
there.
of course it's there.
Like I'd want it to not be there. That's what that's my wishful thinking.
I would like that too.
I feel like we do, like we do have moments that feel like pure joy and normalcy, but I want like a full 24 hours of us hanging out together. Like brain cancer doesn't have a part.
I know. And like maybe one day there will be a cure and that will be a thing. And that's what I hope.
I know.
And it's like, I know that like you texted me the other night. You're like, I'm hoping that we're going to be at college graduations for our kids, you know, and things like that. And I think I live maybe a little bit closer to the present than you do when you think about our stuff. And I love that about you, that you continue to like hope for and believe in a future where I'm here and we get to celebrate all the good stuff and all the shitty stuff too.
Right.
Yeah. And I think I maybe just don't let myself get as attached to that idea because
I don't know how.
I don't know how you do. Maybe. I think that's like, I actually find it more comforting to say to myself, like, this is probably the timeline. And you
that like brings me like so much sadness.
I know.
Like I can't believe that is a true timeline.
But we don't know what the true timeline is.
Yeah, and so for me it's like those 6-year-old women in Hawaii and like having sleepovers, like
like we will be in an old age home.
Yeah, we like, but that's what I always thought.
I know.
And believed, and I was so like congested with snot. But like you, me, and Alex, like the three of us have always been so close, and I just feel like we've seen what our future could be.
Oh, for sure.
And what it was, and that was just seen as fact. Like this is the only way.
1000%. There was like we were always going to be crotchety old ladies together.
Yeah.
Going through the retirement home.
Like going through menopause together.
Yeah, like doing all the things. Family vacations, all the things. Like you just build up this idea of like what your life is going to look like. And then you get some bad news and it kind of makes you wonder if those things are going to happen. And I think it just like goes back to like that uncertainty piece, which is like what you felt so much with Shayla, was like just so much uncertainty.
Yeah. It was like, what the thing is with, I guess with Shayla too, it's like within me. And so like that was the most traumatic grief I've ever experienced. And then when I'm grieving here, but like you're right here, it's like I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, I know.
Like this, I just don't. And like there is so much uncertainty, but then there's some certainty, and like the certainty I do know is
not great.
No
stuff. Yeah.
Like the fact that like you're on chemo, and like I'm just like grieving all of that already.
I know. Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers of grief for like just the normalcy of life that like isn't there anymore, you know? And I don't know, I think the way that you said it is the way that I feel about it too. Like it's within me.
Yeah.
You know? And so like that same sense of like, this is horrible, but like I have some control over how I feel is
right.
like what I feel in my diagnosis. But I can imagine that being on the outside of it, but being so close to me, it just probably feels like so much helplessness and desperation and like wanting to make things better and wanting to be there. And like also like doing all of that while you're still like fully living your life. Like
I know it's sometimes it's like how
right. I'm just like you're a full working person with a successful business, with 2 kids, with a relationship.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, sure. But like I think that just living.
No. But I'm saying but having to show up in all those ways. And I'm saying it for myself too. Like
yeah.
When something hard is happening, it's like life doesn't stop.
Right.
Like,
you still have to show
keep
up.
showing up. And that's true whether you have cancer or you've had baby loss or
Yeah.
whatever's happening in your life, you know, like you always have to show up and be there for the people in your life. You don't have to, but you and I would, because that's just the type of people that we are.
Yeah. I know.
And so I think it's just, yeah, it's really challenging to like balance those things, and the uncertainty of it all, I feel like, makes it really hard to process, because it's like, what are you processing?
That's every day. What am I processing?
Right. Like, what are you grieving? Are you grieving?
Yeah. Like, you're right here.
Right. I'm right here.
Can feel you. You're right here. And your kid is right here. So it's so fucked up, because I'm like, what am I grieving? You're right here. But then
like that when anticipatory grief a little bit, like,
yeah. And then,
maybe.
And then that night in the hospital, when you got that report, that like, I'm grieving everything that has changed since that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Because before we knew what it was, it could have been many different things that had totally different outcomes.
Yeah.
This particular diagnosis is a sort of brutal one, but also just looks so different for so many people. Like, some people are living with it for 10 plus years, 20 plus years, and have never had recurrence.
Right.
And then some people are dead within 18 months.
I know.
That's why, for me, that's something that I've been like really grappling with, is like, how do I attack that? You know, like, how do I figure out how to move through life not knowing how much time I have, but like, then I remember nobody does.
Right.
And
like, our friend's cousin died in a motorcycle accident.
So young, and yeah, so sweet, and just out of nowhere, you know, and you just don't know how much time you have. So it's like, I have information, but that's not like a guarantee.
Which I think makes it hard with the Optune device.
Yeah.
Around like, you've done 6 weeks of radiation, 6 weeks of chemo, 5 days on of chemo every single month, and then you're given the opportunity, which is like,
I mean, it is, because a lot of people don't have access to it, but
to wear this device where you have to shave your head every other day and put these electrodes on and wear this battery pack around your waist, and you're plugged in 24 hours to this little robot that they say can extend your life, and yet it's like so limiting.
Like, maybe like that, maybe it can extend your life
a little bit higher percentage.
Yeah.
And it's limiting your life now.
Right. So it's just like, it's like trading time. Like, I'm going to give up time now to bank time for later. But like, what if I don't get that time later?
Right. And I see it so clearly. Like, I don't hold anything against you for giving up saggy.
Yeah.
And like, what's like the hardest part, like the thing you grapple with the most?
I think just like this idea, and I think this is tied into like this idea of motherhood in general, of like doing anything for your kid, and like just being the best parent you could possibly be. And in my case, that means like being here.
Yeah.
And like, no matter the cost. And I don't think that that's like fair to put on myself.
Right.
But it's how I maybe imagined I would always be. Like, I would just be like, it doesn't matter if I'm not happy. At least I'm here, like, for Brody, and at least I'm here for Hank, and at least I'm here for my friends, and for you and Alex, and you know. And it's like, and now I'm realizing, like, if I have to like live every day feeling miserable, like, I actually don't know if that's worth it, especially if my time is short. And so
I think like
just
the lights, like even with Shayla, right? I'm like, what's the quality of the life that she would have? It's different, but I think in a similar question of,
no, it is.
If you can have the quality of life now, like, are you willing to trade some of that in
for time,
for extension?
Right. And like,
and you don't know what that extension looks like.
No. And that's the thing. There's no certainty to it. So it's like completely,
like, you could be breathing and living, but if it extends your life, but you can still get reoccurrence. It's not like
right. It's not like this is what I was talking about with my own therapist. Like, it's not like they've said to me like, hey, so this is like a foolproof plan, and then I've said no.
right.
It's like they told me that this is the only other thing that's has actual research behind it, and there's some good data, and I gave it a try.
Yeah.
And that I can always come back to it later. I can sometimes be very all or nothing. But yeah, it's like when you think about yourself as a parent, it's like you just want to believe that like you would do whatever you can to like make your kid's life the best that it could be, even at the expense of your own happiness.
It's so easy to just say that.
It's easy to say that, but like then when you're in it, it's like, but like me being happy is like directly impacting my child.
Yeah.
And like I just didn't really think about that before.
Sure. Well, you didn't need to.
No.
It's easy to have ideas of how you think you would be, and then when you're in it, it's usually like you're not that powerful to know how you would act in the future.
Yeah. I know. If only.
And I like totally, I just like, I understand, and I'm probably would do the same, even though I don't know. Right. But I imagine, I see how it impacts you, and I like hate saggy, and like I want you here, obviously, because you saw how sad I am.
Yeah, I know.
Not imagining a life without you in it, but like I want you living a life that's meaningful, like and easier
and, like, to be able
now.
to do things too, like
go in the sun.
Like we're going on a trip this summer, and it's like I can't be in the sun for more than 3 minutes when it's not even that hot outside, and like we live in Los Angeles.
Right. There's so many limitations. Like if there's sun that gets on it, it overheats. You have to shave your head every other day. You get head sores. There's so many things that get in the way. But anyway, I'm glad we went deeper.
I appreciate you sharing your biggest fears with me.
Yeah.
Because I know that's really hard, and I know you don't want me to worry about you.
I know. And like
but
it's already out there. I know.
And because I imagine myself in your position all the time.
Yeah.
And
I was like, the thing I fear is like already a reality.
Right. I know, like the worst case scenario has happened.
Yeah.
I mean, like not the worst case.
No, not the worst.
But like the pre-worst case scenario has happened.
Yeah.
And like I think we've been doing a pretty good job of like making the most of our time together.
I think so. I love you.
I love you. Hugs. Okay, bye friends. Thanks so much for listening to Grief Street. We put out new episodes every Monday. If you'd like to support us, give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to find the video version of our episodes. If you'd like to contact us, please email griefstreetpod@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 508-474-3378. That's 508-GRIEFST. Our theme song is Hepcat Jive, courtesy of purpleplanet.com. We'll see you next time.